The first thing I saw that Monday morning was a steel gate where a road had, not near the road, not beside it, directly across it. The gate stood 12 feet tall between two new stone columns, painted black, topped with narrow iron spikes, and locked with a keypad that flashed a red light every time I entered the code. The HOA office had emailed me 3 days earlier. Access denied. I tried it again. Access denied. Behind me, my silver Volvo sat half on the shoulder of Arroyo Vista Road, its hazard lights blinking into the early California fog. In front of me, beyond the gate, was the winding private lane that led to my client's home. And behind that gate was a 72-year-old woman named Evelyn March, standing on her porch in a robe and slippers, watching me through the morning mist. She had been trapped in her own house for 46 minutes. I knew that because she had called me at 6:14 a.m. "Anna," she'd said, trying hard not to let her voice shake. "They put up a gate overnight." At first, I assumed she meant the neighborhood entrance gate. A code problem. A power outage. Something annoying, but fixable. Then she said, "No, they put it across my driveway." That was when I got dressed. I had worked property disputes around Southern California for almost 12 years. I was not an attorney, and I never pretended to be one. What I did was simpler, though people often underestimated how useful it could be. I read records. I matched maps to deeds. I found the missing page in an old subdivision file. I listened carefully when someone said, "That's always been that way," because those 5 words usually meant nobody had checked whether it was supposed to be. Most of my work began after people had already been told they had no options. A family would receive a threatening HOA letter. A homeowner would be handed a fine over a fence that had stood longer than the board members had lived in the neighborhood. A neighbor would quietly push a retaining wall 2 feet over the line and hope nobody measured it. By the time they found me, they were usually angry, exhausted, and embarrassed that something so small had become so ugly. Evelyn had not called me angry. She had called me scared. That mattered. I stepped out of my car and walked toward the gate. The construction crew had done polished work. Fresh concrete at the base of the columns. New black asphalt where the lane met the public road. A brass plaque mounted beside the keypad read, "Canyon Oaks, Estates, private access only, authorized residents and guests." Below it sat a small camera angled toward the street. The lane behind it curved uphill through a stand of mature coast live oaks. At the top, barely visible through the branches, was Evelyn's pale yellow bungalow. It had been there long before Canyon Oaks Estates existed. Long before the stucco homes, the community clubhouse, the decorative fountains, and the glossy brochures promising exclusive hillside living. The gate had been built so cleanly that anyone passing by might have assumed it belonged there. That was the trick with property disputes. If something looked official enough, people stopped asking questions. I took photographs from every angle. The keypad, the columns, the construction permit sticker taped inside the temporary electrical box, the new asphalt, the security camera. Then I zoomed in on a small white sign mounted at eye level. "No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." That sign was less than 20 feet from the place where Evelyn had driven every day for 36 years. My phone rang again. "Can you see me?" Evelyn asked. "I can see you." I called the HOA manager. He said, "I'm not locked in." He said, "I can walk out." I looked at the slope beside the lane. It was steep, dry, and covered in loose gravel. There was no sidewalk, no safe pedestrian route. Evelyn used a cane after hip surgery the previous winter. Did he say that in writing? He emailed it. Forward it to me. He also said the gate is temporary. "That's good," I said. She went quiet for a moment. "Why is that good?" "Because temporary structures still need someone to take responsibility for them." She gave a small laugh. "But it didn't last." "Anna, I have a doctor's appointment at 9. "I know." "How?" "Because it's in the email you sent me last week." Her appointment was with a cardiologist in Encinitas. Nothing emergency related. but Evelyn had waited nearly 3 months for it. She had also arranged transportation because she no longer felt comfortable driving long distances alone. Her driver was due to arrive in less than 2 hours. I walked to the gate and pressed the intercom button. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a man answered. His voice was clear, controlled, and already irritated. "This is private property." "Good morning," I said. "My name is Anna Reyes. I'm here on behalf of Evelyn March, whose only vehicle access appears to be blocked. You are not authorized to be on Canyon Oaks property. I'm standing on the public shoulder of Arroyo Vista Road." A pause. Then the man said, "Miss March has been notified of the new security procedures. She is not being denied access. She simply has not completed the updated access registration." That is not what she told me. She has a temporary pedestrian exit. Evelyn March is 72 years old, Uzakane, and has a medical appointment this morning. She needs vehicle access. That's not my decision. Whose decision is it? Another pause. This one longer. The board's. Which board member can authorize the gate to be opened? The board is not taking calls from unauthorized third parties. Then please tell the board this. I'll be requesting the approved gate plans, the permit file, the emergency access plan, and the recorded document authorizing you to obstruct this lane. His voice changed slightly. Not fear. Not yet. More like annoyance that I had used the word recorded. "You're welcome to make whatever requests you feel are appropriate," he said. "But the gate is legal." "Then you won't mind sending the paperwork." "The gate is legal," he repeated. Then the intercom clicked off. I stood there for a second, looking at my reflection in the black metal. The gate was expensive. The stonework was expensive. The keypad system was expensive. Somebody had spent real money to make it look permanent. People do not spend that kind of money on something they think will be removed next week. I drove back down the road, parked in a turnout where I could see the entrance, and called the County Fire Authority's non-emergency line. I did not accuse anyone of breaking the law. I did not demand that someone rush out with sirens. I described what I saw: a newly installed controlled access gate across a residential lane, an elderly resident inside, no visible emergency access device, and no clear turnaround for an ambulance. The dispatcher took the address and asked whether the resident was in immediate danger. "Not right now," I said, "but she has a medical appointment this morning, and I'm concerned about emergency access." "An inspector may contact you," she said. That was enough for the moment. Then I called Evelyn's transportation service. I explained that the gate was blocking the lane and asked them not to leave when they arrived. I wanted a witness who had nothing to do with the conflict. The dispatcher told me their driver, Marcus, would wait up to 30 minutes. B8, 28. The fog had started to burn off. Sunlight hit the gate, turning its black paint almost blue. A white town car pulled up behind me. Marcus got out, wearing a navy polo shirt with the transportation company logo over the pocket. "You Anna?" he asked. "I am." "You're the person who said somebody built a gate in front of a customer's house?" "Apparently." He looked toward Evelyn's bungalow. "That's her place?" "Yes." He stared at the gate. "How does she get out?" "That is what we're trying to find out." Marcus walked up to the keypad, pressed the call button, and waited. Nobody answered. He tried again. Nothing. Adopt patruzeci și unu. Evelyn called from inside. "They sent someone," she said. A golf cart was coming down the lane from the clubhouse side of the community. A man in a pale gray polo shirt drove it slowly toward the gate. He was probably in his late 40s. Neat dark hair, expensive sunglasses, clipboard on his lap. When he got closer, I recognized him from the HOA directory photo Evelyn had sent me the night before. Grant Holloway, president of the Canyon Oaks Estates Homeowners Association. He stopped the golf cart inside the gate, got out, and looked at me like I had parked a garbage truck in front of his office. "Miss Reyes," he said, "you're creating a scene." "No," I said. The gate did that. His mouth tightened. You have no standing here. Evelyn March does. Ms. March has been informed that all residents must comply with the community security program. She is not a resident of your community. That is debatable. I looked at him for a moment. No. I said, it isn't. Grant folded his arms. Her house is accessed through Canyon Oaks. Her guests drive through Canyon Oaks. Her utilities run through Canyon Oaks. She benefits from Canyon Oaks security. That doesn't make her subject to your HOA. We're not trying to make her subject to anything. We're protecting the neighborhood. By locking an elderly woman behind a gate, she has pedestrian access. Marcus, who had been silent until then, gave a short, disbelieving laugh. Grant turned toward him. Who are you? I'm her driver. Marcus said. She has a medical appointment. Grant looked back at me. Then she can reschedule. The words came out so casually that for 1 second, even he seemed surprised. He had said them aloud. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Grant noticed, you don't have permission to record me. We're outside. You're speaking to us voluntarily. Put that away. No. His face went still. Not angry. Controlled. That was worse. Men like Grant did not need to raise their voices because most people around them had already learned to back down. This property is private, he said. The board approved the gate after several reports of suspicious activity. Ms. March was offered access registration. She refused to sign the security agreement. What agreement? The standard community access agreement. Send it to me. I'm not sending you anything. Then send it to her. She has it. I glanced toward Evelyn's house. Did she receive an agreement? No, she said through my phone speaker. I received a letter saying I had to sign one within 10 days. Grant heard her. His expression shifted again. It was included. It was not. Evelyn said. He raised his voice just enough for her to hear across the distance. Evelyn, we have been more than patient with you. That was the first moment I understood this was not about security. It was about control. I lowered my phone, opened the email she had forwarded earlier, and reread the message from the HOA manager. It was brief. Ms. March may exit the property on foot through the side pedestrian opening. Vehicle access will be restored after execution of the Canyon Oaks Community Security and Liability Agreement. There it was. Not a code issue. Not a malfunction. Not a temporary inconvenience. They wanted her signature. I looked back at Grant. What does the liability agreement require? It is routine. That wasn't my question. It requires acknowledgement of community access procedures. And an indemnity clause. For what? For use of our private road. The breeze moved through the oak branches above us. Somewhere down the hill, a leaf blower started. The ordinary sound made the moment feel even stranger. They were trying to force Evelyn to sign away something. Maybe not ownership. Not yet. But possibly a right, an easement, a claim, a future objection. I had seen versions of it before. A homeowner would be told that a long-used driveway was merely a courtesy. A shared lane would suddenly become private. A board would place a gate, demand an agreement, and wait for the isolated resident to sign because they needed to get to work. School, a farmacie, or a doctor. Once people signed, the paper became more important than the truth that came before it. I walked closer to the gate. Grant, I said, did the board obtain a title report before it installed this? He smiled slightly. Of course we did. Then you know why Evelyn can't sign your agreement. His smile disappeared. I did not know yet whether he had seen the document I was thinking of. I had only seen a blurry reference to it in Evelyn's original deed, a line that mentioned a recorded access easement dated 1978. But I knew enough to recognize when someone else knew exactly what they were hiding. Grant stepped toward the keypad panel. Ms. March can access the pedestrian gate, he said. That is the board's final position. Then he turned his back on us. Grant, I called. He stopped. If there is a recorded easement through this property, this gate is not a security feature. He looked over his shoulder. It's an obstruction. For the first time that morning, he looked uncertain. Not defeated. Not worried. Just uncertain. Then he climbed into the golf cart and drove away uphill, leaving Evelyn behind the locked gate and leaving me with a question that mattered more than anything else. What exactly had Canyon Oaks Estates spent so much money trying to make her surrender? I did not go home after Grant drove away. I went straight to the San Diego County Recorder's office. There are moments in this kind of work when people expect something dramatic. They imagine me kicking open a filing cabinet, finding one glowing document, and walking out with the answer in my hand. Real records work is quieter than that. It smells like old paper, toner, and carpet cleaner. It involves waiting for systems to load, reading legal descriptions that look like they were written by people who disliked punctuation, and learning not to get excited until you have checked the page before and the page after the thing you think you found. But I had one advantage that morning. Grant had reacted when I said the word easement. That reaction told me the document existed. I started with Evelyn's deed. She had emailed me a scanned copy years earlier when I helped her challenge a landscaping assessment. The deed itself was not complicated. In 1989, Evelyn and her late husband, Martin, had purchased a modest single-family home on 14 acres from an older couple named Harold and Jeanette Price. The legal description referred to the house as Parcel B of a larger tract. Then came the sentence I had been thinking about all morning. Subject to, and together with, a non-exclusive easement for ingress, egress, and public utility purposes, as recorded in Book 1978. Page 4412 Official Records of San Diego County. That was the line. It was not proof by itself. Not yet. Easements can be altered. They can be abandoned in rare circumstances. They can be replaced by later recorded agreements. Sometimes the paper trail becomes a maze of transfers, reparcel maps, and oddly worded exceptions. But a recorded access easement does not vanish because a homeowners association builds a beautiful gate and calls a road private. I pulled the 1978 document. The clerk printed it for me in 2 sections because the original filing was 27 pages long. The first few pages were exactly what I expected: a land division agreement between the Price family and a developer called Arroyo Hills Development Corporation. The Prices had sold most of their hillside acreage in 1978. The developer planned a small luxury subdivision on the lower portion of the property, but the Prices had kept the upper lot where Evelyn's house now stood. The condition of that sale was written plainly in the middle of page 8. The grantor reserves for the benefit of Parcel B, its owners, successors, tenants, invitees, emergency service providers, delivery personnel, and utility companies, a perpetual, non-exclusive easement for vehicular and pedestrian ingress and egress over the 40-foot access corridor shown on Exhibit C. Perpetual, vehicular, owners, successors, invitees, emergency service providers. The wording could not have been clearer if someone had written it specifically for a gate dispute 48 years later. I turned to Exhibit C. There it was, a hand-drawn map of the original tract. The access corridor began at Arroyo Vista Road, curved through the area that had later become Canyon Oaks Estates, and continued uphill to Evelyn's parcel. The exact gate location sat inside the easement corridor, not close to it. Inside it, I scanned the map, printed 2 copies, then went back to the chain of title. That part took longer. Canyon Oaks had changed hands 3 times before the modern HOA took control. In 1996, a developer expanded the neighborhood. In 2008, the association took title to the common areas. Including the internal road system, there were road maintenance agreements, a utility amendment, and a fire access memorandum. Then I found the document Grant had not wanted me to see. It had been recorded 6 months earlier. Canyon Oaks Estates HOA had entered into a contract to sell a narrow strip of unused hillside common area to a builder named Westbrook Residential Partners. The land was small by suburban standards, just under 3 acres. But it sat on a ridge with an ocean-facing view. Westbrook wanted to construct 6 high-end homes. The proposed homes would not touch Evelyn's property. That was not the problem. The problem was access. The only practical construction route crossed the same corridor Evelyn used to reach her house. The plans showed heavy equipment coming through the development's interior road and then continuing uphill along a widened section of lane beside Evelyn's driveway. According to the preliminary site map, the developer wanted to regrade the road, add a secondary gatehouse, and restrict the upper segment during construction. I leaned closer to the page. A note beside the proposed work zone read, "Existing access rights to be resolved before commencement." That phrase told me more than the rest of the file combined. Not accommodated. Not preserved. Resolved. Evelyn had been in the way. The HOA did not need her to become a community member because they cared about neighborhood security. They needed her to sign their agreement because the agreement would recast her recorded easement as permission granted by Canyon Oaks. A license. Not a property right. And a license could be revoked. I requested copies of the recorded contract, the preliminary plans, and the amendment reference number. Then I drove to the county planning office 3 blocks away. By then, it was almost noon. Evelyn had missed her cardiology appointment. Marcus had waited until the clinic called and confirmed there was no way to fit her in later that day. He left only after promising to drive her whenever the gate situation changed. I hated that part. Documents are powerful, but they do not give someone back a missed appointment or the feeling of standing outside their own home while strangers debate whether they deserve access to it. When I called Evelyn from the planning office parking lot, she answered on the first ring, "Did you find anything?" "I found the easement." She did not say anything for a few seconds. Then she asked, "Is it real?" "Yes." "Can they take it?" "Not by putting a gate over it." Her breath caught. "They told Martin we didn't have any rights anymore." "Who told him?" "The developer. Years ago. Before Canyon Oaks was built." I opened my notebook. "Tell me everything you remember." It was the first time she had mentioned Martin that day. Her husband had died 9 years earlier, but she still spoke about him in the present tense. When she was remembering something important, Martin had been a civil engineer. He had spent most of his career working on municipal water projects. He was not confrontational. Evelyn told me, but he was meticulous. When the original developer began building Canyon Oaks in the late 1990s, Martin had received letters asking him to sign an updated road use agreement. He refused after reading the language. They said it was to make things easier. Evelyn told me. Martin said nothing gets easier when somebody asks you to sign away something you already own. Did he keep the letters? I think so. Where? In the garage. There are boxes. He labeled everything. That did not surprise me. I told her not to let anyone from the HOA onto her property. I also told her not to confront Grant, the manager, or any board member alone. Then I drove back up the hill. This time, I did not stop at the gate. I parked on the public road again and waited for the fire inspector to call. Atunu, 7:13 pine. M. My phone rang. "This is Inspector Leon Park with County Fire." The caller said, "You reported a gate at Canyon Oaks?" "I did." "Are you still nearby?" "Yes." "I'm about 15 minutes out." When Inspector Park arrived, he came in a white county SUV. Not a fire engine. He was compact, calm, and carried a tablet under one arm. He listened without interrupting while I explained the situation. I showed him my photographs and the email telling Evelyn to use the pedestrian opening. Then I showed him the recorded easement map. He studied it for a moment. "Does the property owner know you have this?" he asked. "The HOA president likely does." That wasn't what I asked. "No, I haven't sent it yet." He nodded once. "Good." He walked to the gate, inspected the keypad, checked the construction tag, and ran a hand along the outside of the stone column. He found a metal panel near the base and opened it with a screwdriver from his pocket. Inside was a small emergency access device. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. "A Knox switch?" "Not exactly. It's supposed to be an emergency override connection. But this installation is incomplete." "What does that mean?" "It means a fire unit may not be able to open this gate from the road." He looked through the gate toward the narrow lane beyond it. Then he stepped back and took several photographs. "Was the gate approved?" I asked. "Looks like there is a permit number." "That doesn't mean I'm done checking it." "Can they keep a resident from driving out while the permit is being reviewed?" "I can't tell you what their property rights are. I can tell you I don't like a controlled gate that blocks required emergency access." That was all I needed him to say. He contacted the county permit desk from his SUV. After a few minutes, he looked up. The permit application lists this as a replacement entry control device for an existing private community entrance. I looked at the gate. "This is not the entrance to the community." "No," he said. "It appears to be an internal gate." "And the application says replacement?" "It does. There wasn't a gate here last week." Inspector Park did not respond immediately. He typed something into his tablet. Then he said, "I'll need to speak with the association." Grant arrived 20 minutes later in the same golf cart. But he was not alone this time. The HOA manager, a thin man named Derek Collins, rode in the passenger seat with a leather portfolio on his lap. Derek was the voice from the intercom. The moment he got out, he glanced at Inspector Park's county SUV and adjusted his expression into something more professional. "Inspector," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Derek Collins, community manager for Canyon Oaks Estates. We were not informed this visit had been scheduled." "That's because it wasn't," Park said. Derek looked at me. "Mia's?" "Reyes has a habit of escalating routine matters." "No," I said. "You do. I document them." Grant gave me a warning look. But Inspector Park had already started asking questions. Who installed the gate? When was it activated? Where was the emergency responder access device? Who approved the decision to deny Evelyn vehicle entry? Did the association know an elderly resident had a medical appointment that morning? Derek answered the first few questions in smooth, vague phrases. The gate was part of an enhanced community security plan. The gate was activated for resident safety. The access device was being finalized. Ms. March had not been denied access, only asked to complete routine registration. Then Inspector Park asked one question that changed the temperature in the air. "Why does a routine registration include an indemnity agreement?" Derek looked at Grant. Grant looked at me. That was enough. "We can discuss that privately," Grant said. "No," I replied. "You can discuss it in writing." He ignored me and faced the inspector. "The agreement is standard legal protection for the association." "Protection from what?" Park asked. "Liability arising from use of the road." "Does Ms. March have recorded access rights?" Grant's jaw tightened. "That is a title matter. It is also relevant to whether this gate interferes with emergency access," Park said. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Grant said, "The association has received legal advice on its position." That sentence was carefully chosen. Not that the association had a legal right. Not that its lawyer had confirmed the gate was lawful. Only that someone had given advice. I had seen people hide behind that wording before. It usually meant the attorney had warned them about something, and they had decided to hear only the part they liked. Inspector Park told Derek that the gate would be reviewed for permit compliance and emergency access requirements. He did not order it removed on the spot. He did not force it open. Real life is slower than that, and I never promised Evelyn instant miracles. But when he left, he gave me a case reference number and one sentence I wrote down immediately. If the installation differs materially from the approved plans, the permit may be suspended. That gave us leverage. Not justice yet. Leverage. Atre patruzech. M. I sat with Evelyn on the floor of her garage while we opened boxes that had not been touched since Martin died. Her garage was neat in the way only a retired engineer's garage could be neat. Every box had a number. Every folder had a label. Every label used the same black marker and small, steady handwriting, We found old tax records, appliance manuals, receipts for roof repairs, a hand-drawn drainage map, 2 binders filled with correspondence from the original developer. Then, in a blue file marked Access Road Do Not Discard, I found what I had been hoping for. Martin had kept every letter. The first was from 1998, asking him to sign a road use agreement for administrative consistency. The second said the new HOA would assume maintenance duties and requested that he acknowledge revocable access privileges. The third letter was the most important. It came from the developer's attorney. It stated that the company recognized Evelyn and Martin's recorded easement, but hoped to reach a mutually beneficial modernization agreement before commencing the next phase of construction. Martin had written one sentence across the bottom in red ink. "My access is not a favor." I read it twice. Then I found a handwritten memo dated 3 weeks later. Martin had spoken with a county surveyor, who confirmed the easement could not be blocked without a legally valid alternative route or Evelyn's voluntary agreement. Beside the note, Martin had drawn a box around 4 words. "Voluntary agreement only." Evelyn sat beside me with one hand over her mouth. "He knew," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "He knew they would try again." "I think he did." That evening, I sent a formal evidence package to Grant, Dedek, every HOA board member, the association's registered agent, the county planning contact, and the fire inspector. I attached the 1978 easement. I attached Exhibit C. I attached the developer's 1998 acknowledgement. I attached the current construction proposal showing the access corridor marked as an unresolved issue. I attached photographs of the locked gate and the incomplete emergency device. Then I wrote 4 short paragraphs. The first stated that Evelyn March held a recorded, perpetual vehicular access easement across the corridor blocked by the gate. The second stated that the HOA had been placed on notice that its gate and proposed agreement interfered with that right. The third asked the association to restore unrestricted vehicle access by 9 a.m. the next morning. The fourth made them a reasonable offer. If Canyon Oaks wanted a legitimate agreement about road maintenance, security procedures, or construction coordination, Evelyn was willing to discuss it after the gate was opened and after the association acknowledged that her access was a right, not a revocable privilege. I ended the email with one sentence. No resident should have to sign away a recorded property, right, simply to leave home. Accept. Doisprezece. B. M. Grant replied. His message was only 5 lines long. He said the HOA disputed my interpretation of the documents. He said the gate would remain in place. He said Evelyn could use the pedestrian entrance. Then he wrote something I had not expected. If Ms. March continues interfering with Canyon Oaks' planned improvements, the association will explore all available remedies, including reimbursement for project delays. I stared at the screen. They were not just trying to get her signature. They were preparing to blame her for the cost of a development she had never agreed to. And that was the moment I understood that opening Evelyn's gate would not be the end of this fight. It would be the beginning. The next morning, Adopt Cincisich, she shopped there. I was parked outside the gate again. I had arrived early because I wanted to see what Canyon Oaks would do before the deadline passed. I did not expect Grant to show up himself, but at Depan 47, the same white golf cart rolled down the lane and stopped beside the keypad. This time, he did not get out. He sat behind the wheel with his phone pressed to his ear, looking through the windshield as if I were a problem that could be managed by refusing to look directly at it. Adopt. Cincisich, she opt. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Derek Collins. The subject line read, Access arrangements for March residents. I opened it. The association had agreed to provide Evelyn with conditional temporary vehicle access while the matter was reviewed. She would receive a remote control device. The gate would remain closed to all other guests, service vehicles, delivery drivers, and emergency personnel unless approved in advance by the HOA office. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Inspector Park at Noah Trey. I walked to the intercom and pressed the button. Derek answered after one ring. Miss Rodriguez, you should have received our resolution. I did? Then this matter is being addressed. No, I said. You offered Evelyn a remote control. You did not restore her easement. She can enter and leave her home. Her cardiologist cannot get in without asking permission. An ambulance cannot get in without asking permission. Her driver cannot get in without asking permission. A utility crew cannot get in without asking permission. Her relatives cannot get in without asking permission. That is standard security procedure. For a private community. Perhaps, Evelyn is not part of your private community. Her access right includes her invitees and emergency service providers. You are not counsel. No, but I can read. He went silent. I continued. And I can tell the county that you were given notice of the recorded document before deciding to keep the gate locked. His reply came colder than before. Your client has made this situation unnecessarily difficult. No. Your board did that when it built a wall across someone else's access route. I ended the call. At no shop this prezeche. Inspector Park called me back. I reviewed the documents you sent. He said, Did you see the HOA's new proposal? I did. What happens now? I've referred the gate permit for a field review. There may be an issue with the scope of work. Maybe? Anna, I know what you want me to say. But I have to do this correctly. I know. I'm sending a notice to the association today. If the gate is not in compliance with the approved permit conditions, it cannot remain active. That was not a victory. Not yet. But it was the first crack in the foundation. Adziche, Patruzici doya. A delivery van pulled up behind me. The driver rolled down his window and held up a box. March residence? He asked. Yes. Where's the gate code? There isn't one. He looked at the gate, then at the house beyond it. You're kidding. I wish I were. He checked his phone. It's medication. Signature required. I called Evelyn. She said it was a prescription refill. Something she needed that day. The driver could not leave it at the gate. He could not hand it to me because the delivery required confirmation from the recipient. I pressed the intercom. No answer. I pressed it again. Still nothing. The driver waited for 9 minutes. Then he apologized, scanned the box back into his system, and drove away. Evelyn watched from her porch. She did not cry. That almost made it worse. She simply stood there with her cane in one hand and her other hand resting against the porch railing, looking at the empty road as if she had finally understood what Grant meant when he called it a security procedure. It was not security. It was dependence. And dependence was exactly what they wanted. I sent the delivery company's confirmation notice to the county case file. I included the time, the driver's name, the package status, and a photograph of the van turning around on Arroyo Vista Road. Then I called Westbrook Residential Partners. I did not accuse anyone of fraud. I did not threaten the company. I asked to speak with the project manager listed on the preliminary site plan. His name was Daniel Weaver. When he came on the line, he sounded rushed. This is Daniel. My name is Anna Reyes. I'm calling about Westbrook's preliminary proposal at Canyon Oaks Estates. There was a pause. Are you with the association? No. I represent the owner of Parcel B, whose recorded access easement crosses the work corridor identified in your project materials. A longer pause. We're still in due diligence. I thought you might be. What exactly is the issue? The HOA has installed a locked gate across the easement and attempted to make the parcel owner sign an agreement acknowledging revocable access. Daniel said nothing. I continued. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I can email you the recorded easement, the exhibit map, and the HOA's written demand. I can also send the county fire access case reference. His voice became careful. Please send those documents. I already did. They were sent to the email address on your application at 9:30 this morning. For the first time since I had met Evelyn, I heard someone connected to Canyon Oaks sound genuinely concerned. Thank you, he said. We'll review them. That would be wise. I hung up. I had no power to make Westbrook cancel its contract. But developers do not like surprises, especially surprises involving land access, construction schedules, financing, permits, insurance, engineering, and future sales all depend on knowing exactly who has the right to use a road. A disputed easement did not always kill a project, but a recorded easement, an obstructed elderly homeowner, an incomplete gate permit, and emails showing that the HOA had known about the issue before making demands? That was not a surprise any responsible developer wanted to inherit. By lunchtime, the neighborhood had started to notice. Canyon Oaks was the kind of place where information traveled fast, but facts traveled slowly. A gardener saw the county SUV. Someone saw the delivery van turned away. A resident posted a photo of the gate on the community forum. Then another resident shared the fire permit notice after Inspector Park taped it inside the gate column. The notice was not dramatic. It did not say that Canyon Oaks had committed some enormous crime. It did not declare the gate permanently illegal. It simply required the association to suspend controlled operation until the county could confirm that the installed system matched the approved plans and provided verified emergency access. But when people read the words "suspend controlled operation," they began asking questions. Why had the board installed it so quickly? Why was the upper road suddenly being treated as an HOA-only route? Why was Evelyn being asked to sign an agreement? Why had nobody been told about Westbrook's development proposal? That afternoon, Grant made his worst mistake. He sent an email to the entire community. It began with the phrase, "Unfortunately, misinformation is being spread by an outside agitator." I read it while sitting at Evelyn's kitchen table. She had made tea neither of us touched. The blue file from Martin's garage sat open between us. The house felt different now. Not safer. Exactly. But less alone. Grant's email claimed that the gate was necessary because of recent safety concerns. It said Evelyn had refused reasonable access procedures. It called the development plans preliminary discussions unrelated to the current gate installation. Then, near the end, he wrote that the board would not allow one non-member property owner to dictate the security needs of more than 100 families. I looked at Evelyn. Did you ever ask them to remove security from their neighborhood? No? Did you ask them to let strangers drive through the community? No. Did you ask for anything beyond the road you have used since 1989? No. Then that email is going to hurt him. She looked worried rather than relieved. Why? Because he just told everyone this is about you against them. And it isn't? No. I said, it's about whether their board is allowed to use community money to erase a property right they don't like. At Patru, Cinci Sprezece. I sent one final message. This time, I did not send it only to the board. I sent it to every Canyon Oaks homeowner whose email address appeared in the association directory. The email was calm. It did not call Grant corrupt. It did not accuse Derek of lying. It did not ask residents to take sides. I attached 5 documents: the 1,978 recorded easement, the exhibit map showing the gate inside the corridor, the HOA's proposed access agreement, the Westbrook site plan showing the corridor marked as existing access rights to be resolved, and Grant's community-wide email. Then I wrote, many of you may not have known that a locked gate was installed across an access easement used by Evelyn March, whose home predates Canyon Oaks Estates. You may also not have known that your HOA has been discussing a sale of Hillside Common Area for a 6-home development project requiring changes to the same access route. Evelyn is not asking to control your neighborhood. She is asking the association to stop blocking a recorded right-of-way. If you have questions about how HOA funds are being used, what documents were reviewed before the gate was installed, or whether the board disclosed the proposed development discussions, those are reasonable questions to ask at your next meeting. That was all. No threats. No insults. Just documents. Within 20 minutes, my phone began ringing. The first call came from a retired paramedic named Linda Cho. She lived 3 houses from the clubhouse and had served on a county emergency preparedness committee before moving to Canyon Oaks. "I read your attachment," she said. "The board told us the gate was at the community entrance." "It isn't." "I know. I drove down there." She paused. "Did they really stop a medication delivery?" "Yes." "That is unacceptable." The second call came from a man named Raymond Bell, who had lived in Canyon Oaks since 2004. He said the board had never mentioned a planned land sale. "The common area belongs to all of us," he said. "How can they sell it without a vote? That depends on the governing documents." I told him, "You should ask for the meeting minutes and sale authorization." The third call came from a younger woman named Maya, who had 2 children in elementary school. "Is that road part of the emergency route?" she asked. "I can't answer that for the county." But the fire inspector is reviewing it." By sunset, the gate had become more than Evelyn's problem. It had become a question nobody on the board wanted to answer in public. "Atchaze, 13 brand. M." Inspector Park returned. This time, a county permit technician came with him. Grant and Derek were waiting by the gate. So were 14 Canyon Oaks residents. Nobody had planned a protest. They had simply arrived on the Biwan. After reading the documents, Linda stood near me with her arms crossed. Raymond had printed the recorded easement and highlighted the words perpetual and vehicular. Maya was holding her son's hand while he stared at the black gate with the uncomplicated suspicion only children have. The technician compared the permit application to the installed structure. The original application described a replacement access control device at the primary community entry. The actual construction was a new internal barrier across an upper access road. The application did not identify Evelyn's recorded easement. It did not show the pedestrian opening. It did not show the incomplete emergency override system. And it did not disclose that the gate would be used to restrict a separately owned parcel. The technician looked at Grant. "Who prepared this application?" "Our contractor," Grant said. "Who signed it?" Grant did not answer. Derek checked his portfolio. Then he said, "The board president signed on behalf of the association." Inspector Park nodded once. "Until this is corrected and reviewed, the gate cannot remain in active operation." Grant stepped forward. "You cannot require us to leave the community unsecured." "We are not discussing your main entrance," Park said. "We are discussing this gate. This is a safety measure." "No," Inspector Park replied. "Right now, it is an unapproved access control installation across a documented vehicular corridor. The county has given you instructions." Grant's face turned red. "You're taking the word of someone who doesn't even live here." Inspector Park looked at the easement map in Raymond's hands. "I'm taking the word of the county record." Nobody spoke after that. Derek walked to the keypad. He took out a ring of keys, opened the control panel, and switched the gate to manual hold-open mode. The metal arms began to move, slowly at first, then Vita. The gate that had trapped Evelyn for 2 days opened with a low mechanical groan. For a few seconds, she did not move. She stood at the top of the lane in the fading light. Looking down at the road, Martin had protected long before anyone imagined an HOA would try to control it. Then she came down in her car. She drove carefully through the open gate, stopped beside me, and rolled down her window. "I thought I would never feel normal leaving my own house again," she said. "You should never have had to feel that way." Grant stood several feet away, silent now. But I knew the fight was not over. The gate was open. The proposed development was still on the table, and the association had just learned that Evelyn was not going to sign anything. 2 days later, Westbrook Residential Partners withdrew from its purchase agreement. The company's letter was short and direct. It cited unresolved access rights, incomplete entitlement disclosures, and uncertainty regarding the proposed construction route. Westbrook had a 60-day due diligence period, and its attorneys had apparently decided that Canyon Oaks was not worth the risk. The board tried to blame Evelyn. Then they tried to blame me. Then they tried to blame the contractor who filed the gate permit, but the residents had the documents now. They learned that Grant and 2 other board members had approved the gate expense without a full community meeting. They learned that almost $68,000 had been taken from the reserve fund for the installation, landscaping, electrical work, and security equipment. They learned that the Westbrook discussions had been going on for nearly 9 months. Most importantly, they learned that the board had known about Evelyn's access easement before the gate was installed. It was in the title report, buried in an attachment, highlighted by the association's own attorney. At the emergency HOA meeting 3 weeks later, Grant tried to explain that the easement had been an unresolved legal ambiguity. Linda stood up from the second row with the 1,978 document in her hand. "No," she said. "An ambiguity is something you can't understand. You understood this. You just hoped Evelyn would be too isolated to fight you." That was the line that ended him. Grant resigned before the meeting was over. Derek's management contract was not renewed at the end of the month. The gate was removed 6 weeks later. Along with the stone columns and the decorative security signs, the county required the association to restore the road shoulder and submit a corrected emergency access plan for the actual community entrance. Canyon Oaks never sold the hillside parcel. The residents voted to keep it as protected common space and install a small fire-safe walking trail instead. It was not a glamorous outcome. No one got rich. No one won a dramatic courtroom judgment, but Evelyn got her driveway back. The HOA had to repay the reserve account for the failed gate project. The board created a rule requiring open member notice before any land sale, access change, or major improvement could move forward. And Evelyn entered a new road maintenance agreement with Canyon Oaks that did exactly what a fair agreement should do. It acknowledged her easement. It preserved access for her guests, deliveries, utilities, and emergency services. It set clear rules for shared maintenance. And it did not ask her to surrender a single right in exchange for being allowed to leave her own home. A month after the gate came down, I visited Evelyn on a bright Saturday morning. Her driveway was open. The old oak trees cast shadows across the road. A grocery delivery truck was backing carefully toward her garage. The driver waved at us through the windshield. Evelyn stood beside me without her cane that day. She had brought it with her, but she did not need it for the short walk to the mailbox. "I keep expecting them to put it back," she said. "They won't." "You sound very certain." "I am." She looked at the open road for a moment. Then she smiled. "Martin would have liked you." I think Martin liked organized paperwork more than he liked most people. That made her laugh. And as we stood there, watching the delivery truck pull away, I thought about Grant's first words to me. "You're creating a scene." Maybe that was what people like him believed. Maybe they thought the problem began only when someone noticed it. But the truth was simpler. The gate had never been the real issue. The issue was that a group of people had decided an old woman's recorded property, right, was inconvenient to their plans. They expected her to be quiet because she was alone. They expected her to sign because they had made ordinary life difficult. They were wrong. A right does not become less real because someone builds a prettier wall around it. And sometimes, all justice needs is one person willing to open the file everyone else hoped would stay closed. If an HOA placed a locked gate across the only road to your home, would you sign their agreement just to get your life back, or would you make them prove they had the right to ask? Tell me where you draw the line between neighborhood security and property rights in the comments. And if you believe the truth is always worth digging for, subscribe to Anna's Neighborhood Justice. Around here, the paperwork always has the final word.